So now to introduce today's speaker, Beccy. Beccy, I'm just giving you control of the screen. Beccy wears many hats. So she's a researcher at Plant and Food Research, chair of Tauranga Moana Biosecurity Capital, and a champion for our kauri and our myrtles. Today she's coming to us as a science lead for Ngā Rākau Taketake. I'm excited that you're sharing this work with us, Beccy. So if you are all good there, feel free to get underway.
Awesome, thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko noho ahau ki raro I te maro o Nonga Taha, ka noho ahau ki te taha o te awa o Utahina, e noho ana au I Rotorua, ko Ngāti Pakeha tōku iwi, ko Beccy Ganley tōku ingoa, e mahi ana ahau ki te rangahau Araha Marakai ki te puki, he kaiarataki o Ngā Rākau Taketake ahau. So hello everyone, my name is Beccy Ganley and I'm going to be talking to you today about Myrtle Rust research. So first off, I thought just a little bit of a summary around Ngā Rākau Taketake, especially for those of you who may not be as familiar with it. So in 2019, the government contracted investment into kauri and Myrtle Rust research. And so a 4-year program was established, Ngā Rākau Taketake. However, the Myrtle Rust funding was only for 3 years. It's gone beyond 3 years for the entire program because of the unusual disruptions that we've had with COVID and the cyclones, and actually probably not the cyclones, more COVID. And so it's now finishing 30th of March 2024, which, as you can appreciate, is very, very soon. So this investment was put within the BioHeritage National Science Challenge, and when we put together the science plan for Ngā Rākau Taketake, we used the Myrtle Rust science plan that's readily available for anyone who's interested in looking in it. And so that was the behind what was selected and what went forward as priorities and what areas were also included. Acknowledging that the entire program covers kauri and myrtle. What was really, really important for us was to continue that research pipeline. So there's been some really, really fantastic programs prior to Ngā Rākau Taketake, projects funded by MPI, Catalyst Project, also Beyond Myrtle Rust. So Beyond Myrtle Rust started before Ngā Rākau Taketake, so we actually had the ability in some cases to progress research that had been started in Beyond Myrtle Rust. So what we ended up with is, this is our summary of what the program looks like, is an area. We've got 3 impact areas: whakamana, empower; taiaki, protect; whakahau, restore. And within each of them we have themes, and so there's 7 themes in total, and I'm going to go through today a little bit about what these themes have done. I'm just going to briefly touch on them, but give a little bit of information more about sort of some of the key work in the Myrtle Rust space that's come through. So the approach for Ngā Rākau Taketake at the start was to reconnect the wider sector together. This was actually really important for kauri. Myrtle, I would say, is a very well-connected community, and so, but that was a key focus for the program. There was also a huge focus on inclusion. In particular, we were looking for new ideas and te ao Māori incorporation into the program. We brought together new teams and had diverse capability. A key focus was Māori leadership. So Biological Heritage National Science Challenge has Māori, non-Māori leadership that comes through to Ngā Rākau Taketake. So I co-lead with Nick Waipara. And then all of the themes we have, apart from one, we all have a Māori co-leadership as part of those. And that was a really important part for us of this program. And now I think we look at co-leadership and then we see it as the norm, but acknowledging in 2019 that wasn't necessarily the case. And we also have international expertise, which is part of the program. So as I mentioned before, the research, we used the Myrtle Rust science plan, building on that previous research. We ended up with 160 researchers from 25 different organisations as part of Ngā Rākau Taketake, but that also includes the kauri side. We've got a transdisciplinary program, and as I've mentioned, we have the Māori co-leads, but we also have a huge amount of Māori-led research and co-designed research with Māori. Now, one of the issues that we did have, which is slightly different from Endeavour MBs or some of the other program, is that we had to kind of balance between our fundamental to applied research. It isn't a fundamental research program, but it also isn't an applied research program. And so that's, we tried to get that balance across what research we did. We also had to balance short-term versus long-term. I'd probably argue that 3 years is short-term, but we had to balance shorter programs or projects in there. And we also needed to make sure that we put a pipeline in for the next stages of research. So how are we different? And as I said previously, 2019, things were quite different then from what we see potentially as the norm now. Things have changed and everybody sees those changes, or not sees the changes, but everybody is doing quite similar things, or you're seeing different initiatives. But in 2019, some of what we put through in Ngā Rākau Taketake was quite different. As I said, we have a huge amount of co-designed, co-led research with Maori researchers, and we also have the Maori co-leads who have been really, really influential in allowing that throughout the program. All of our themes have mātauranga Māori embedded in the projects, and one of the other parts that we've put in was the Myrtle Ora community hui. We also have the Kauri Ora ones, but we have the Myrtle Ora ones. And that's been a fantastic way to keep the community together and to share that information. And it's perhaps a little bit different from how traditionally we have looked at connecting with end users, stakeholders, collaborators, partners. And as I said before, 160 researchers from over 25 organisations. There's been a lot of people involved in Ngā Rākau Taketake over the time. I also should say the investment for Myrtle Rust within Ngā Rākau Taketake, it was for 3 years and it was $5 million. So it wasn't necessarily a huge amount of money for Myrtle Rust research, but we also had the ability, because a lot of the times we were dealing with forests where kauri and myrtles overlap. And so we had the ability for some of the work to be able to work on the forest rather than specifically on the diseases or the pathogens. So this is what we saw as our focus and our challenge, working together to share our knowledge, focusing on the kaupapa. You can get distracted or go off track, so it's really core that we kept that kaupapa focus, and that is the restoring the mauri of our ngāhere, and also that collective effort over the period of the program. So we thought that's what our challenges were, but the reality, I'd say that these were the biggest challenges that we faced. So in 2019, we start off and we've got the teams are coming together. We're just starting to reach out to our communities, and then all of a sudden we have COVID that comes in. We can't get to our research sites. We've got people in lockdown, and that went on for the core part of this entire program. If you forget how long Auckland stayed in a lockdown, but that was also a key route for us to be able to access Northland. So even if we had researchers in other areas that were able to travel, you couldn't actually get through to some of those sites, and it was for a long period of time. There was a disruption of shipping, and then at a certain point there actually became, we had people who were unwell, or communities who were not keen to have other people from different regions come into those areas, and in particular some of our very rural areas. So there was a lot that sat in there, and it was incredibly disruptive, and I'd say it's the most extreme experience that I've had from a science perspective, and that ability to have to adjust. And I will commend all of the researchers over this time for what they have done, because the ability for them to deliver under those circumstances have been really challenging. So we come through COVID, and then we get Cyclone Gabrielle, and that also had a huge impact on us. Many of the areas where we have research sites fell in where the cyclone went, and that was from the top of the north all the way down into the Hawke's Bay as well. It was again incredibly disruptive, hit right in the middle of the season where you might be going out and collecting data as well, and again, just wasn't really what we were expecting to come along. So as I said before, I would highly commend all of the researchers who have faced those really tough times and have managed to deliver on programs under extremely trying circumstances. But anyway, onto the program. I said I was going to cover all of the 7 themes that we had, but I'm actually going to start off with te whakahongana. So te whakahongana for us is a different approach of how to work with and include Māori in our systems. So it's co-led by Waitangi Wood, Julian Cheatham, Dave Milner, Albie Marsh, and Nick Waipara. It's not a theme, but it's an overall approach that has been applied across Ngā Rākau Taketake. In particular for this, it's about making sure that we have equitable resourcing for mana whenua in our research programs. We used biodiversity management areas. We have cultural authority agreements that were foundational for any of the work. And it was also recognising Māori sovereign rights over the areas where the work was being conducted. So this was a really important part for us, was to get this right at the start and across the program, and then the rest has flowed through from there. So I'm just going to list that. I'll also say at the very end, I put up some websites. All of the information on this is available on the Ngā Rākau Taketake website. So going into the themes, the first theme that we have is Oranga, and led by Mel and Valence. And so this was, actually Mel used to describe it initially at the start as unashamedly Māori-led research for Māori. I think that at this point she's been able to drop that unashamedly, and I think that's a huge progress in towards the acceptability of Māori research, Mātauranga Māori, as a knowledge system in our research programs. So they had a variety of different programs, and here I actually haven't included one specifically on kauri, but they had Te Reo o Te Wao Nui a Tāne, that was looking at kupu Māori words and the sounds that are associated with a healthy forest and how can they reintroduce those sounds. Hapu solutions for Myrtle Rust and Te Mana Motuhake o Ngā Kakano, the sovereignty of seeds, which I'm just going to very briefly talk about. So in this program here, they've been looking at appropriate ways to store seeds, appropriate from a Māori perspective. And so part of it has been providing seed bank drum kits to groups so that they can collect their own seed, looking at what is appropriate conservation techniques and working in that space. And so they've also worked with Theme 7, so I'll come back to them a bit more later on too. The second one is Mobilising for Action, which is led by Marie and Mark. And this is our social science part where we're focusing on how can we connect and empower communities. They've done a huge amount of work. I'm going to point you to the the web page at the bottom. They have all of the resources that are available on there. They talk about all the programs. If there's additional work that you're wanting to see what they've done, have a look at there. So they've done a variety of different things, looked into how they can have public artworks as a different way to connect with community. They've put art into the schools to build awareness, and done a lot of different research on engagement and how to engage and how to empower. And I'm just going to cover very briefly a couple of them. Toi Tu Te Ngāhere, and this is one of the ones looking at putting artwork into the schools and creating that connection for the kids with the Ngāhere. And so they have a curriculum that they're putting together at the moment, which will be put out to all of the schools in New Zealand. The other one that I wanted to put in was the public art project. In the bottom corner, that is my piece of art that I did. I embroidered that, and I reckon that's a pretty good representation of Myrtle Rust on a leaf. I will say I was quite proud of that. I went to the art gallery, and that's a picture of me in front of a piece of art that's hanging in the gallery that I actually contributed to. And so those pieces were embroidered with Myrtle Rust symptoms and larvae and all sorts of things that people have put onto them in regards to Myrtle Rust. And I've got to say, as a scientist, I never thought I'd have something sitting in an art gallery. So it's just a very different way of connecting. I also just wanted to point out this theme did the Mate Tipu Mate Rākau video that came out a couple of years ago. And also, if you didn't attend the Myrtle Rust community hui yesterday, the sequel for this is coming out very shortly. It should be out within the next day or two. And I would highly recommend everyone watching it. This first one was fantastic, and I'm sure that the second one will be great too. I've seen a snippet and it looks excellent. Theme 3 was our risk assessment and ecosystem impacts. So we have Luikard and Simon who led this one, and they were really looking to understand the species and the ecosystems. Part of this one was making sure that we had some baseline information. It's really, really critical. Often you start a program and then, or not program, but you start working on something and 10 years later, if you haven't taken that background information, you don't have the ability to see, have management actions work, what's getting worse, what's getting better, if you don't take that background information. And so it's a really critically important part of the program. So they've done a variety of different things. Some of their risk assessments have been ecological, cultural, social, and economic. They've characterised or started to, or perhaps will be further contributed to ecosystem characterisation, looking at forest structure, community composition, and just taking a huge amount of baseline information and capturing it now. One of the things I did want to just touch on with this is we have a PhD, Tracy Godfrey, and she's done a risk assessment based on ecological, cultural and social economic values. This should be coming out soon, and it's underpinned by Te Ao Māori, and it has been co-created with Mana Whenua, and believe that they have used Myrtle Rust as a case study to apply this against as well. It's a generic biosecurity decision framework, but it can be applied to Myrtle Rust and other diseases as well. This is just sort of a snapshot. I'd recommend going onto the website, to the Ngā Rākau Taketake website, if you're interested in any of these. They've done work on the forest structure. They've looked at macrofauna and mesofauna, avian soundscapes, microbial communities and activities, fine root biomass and productivities. Sometimes they'll be done in a forest, which sometimes it might have more of a kauri lens on it, but as I said at the start, I don't think there's a single kauri forest in New Zealand that doesn't have a myrtle sitting in it. So there are linkages across for Myrtle Rust as well. They've had lots of students, so there's lots of thesis, and there will be lots of papers that have either come out or will be coming out soon as those students finish up. The next one I'm going to talk about is Mātauranga Māori Framework for Surveillance, led by Waitangi and Cecilia. And this was around, as it says, a framework. So they had three components. One was the framework. They had an integrated intelligence platform, which I'll talk about briefly, and proof of absence models. I've also put the website if you want to look up about the integrated intelligence platform as well. So the first one was the surveillance, Mātauranga surveillance framework. They used the biodiversity management areas and developed these up, and they were also applied through to Te Whakahongana as well as what the land management areas would be. These were based on the size of iwi in New Zealand are disproportionate. So you have very big South Island iwi area, but you might up in the north have much smaller blocks. And they were gazetted areas which they had already been in New Zealand system, and they have applied them through to this to make it a manageable land area across New Zealand, but also something that fits in with tribal boundaries. And so they've had, their framework includes how you can actually have Māori surveillance teams, and they've demonstrated it, working in doing cultural monitoring and capturing that data, bringing it back in. The other part of their program was the integrated intelligence platform, and this was making sure that they had a platform that allowed hapu iwi to have access to the data within their Rocky or their BMA, but also the ability for that to be shared with different agencies. So if you're looking into a new program, I'd highly recommend having a look at this platform, seeing how it could be used. There's a publication that's come out on it, and I've put the website link to that at the bottom again as well. I didn't put the name for this theme for this one. This is theme 5, and this is Control, Protect and Cure, led by Marion and Dave. And they've been looking at different ways that we can develop tools to help with both Phytophthora agathodicida and Osteopuccinia cidii. This one here, we have more of a shift into working on either pathogen, whereas the previous themes, although there have been specific parts to do with Myrtle Rust, in some cases there was a lot of crossover between both pathogens and diseases. Just a snapshot, they've had detection tools. The disinfecting for Myrtle Rust has been a key part. They've done quite a bit of work, in particular in the kauri area, looking at bioactives. However, some of the bioactives they're looking at are myrtles. They have a cultural health index app that they have got used, which has been put through into Te Whakahongana as well. And they had a whole variety of seed and scope projects that they've put in. But probably the two there have been the molecular assays for the differentiating of the 4 genetic strains of Buccinea, which has been done with overseas collaborators, and the disinfectants work for Myrtle Rust. And again, encourage you to go to the Ngā Rākau Taketake website for more information. Theme 6, host pathogen environment. The background is not Myrtle Rust, but it was such a cool picture that I couldn't help but put it up. And they are Phytophthora echinacea, sporangia, which have been stained. I just thought it was such a cool picture. This one's led by Julianne and Nari, and this is in essence the disease triangle. They're looking at that fundamental knowledge on the pathogens. And it's that part where to inform management. So they've done the first one is a project on kauri, which I won't talk about, same with the Phytophthora echinacea epidemiology, but the two from this one, which are, or three I should say, is we had work in here on Buccinea epidemiology. We've also had work of targeting the effectors in Buccinea, and it was actually a key program that allowed continuity of some of the field sites that had been monitored in the MPI program, and making sure that we continue to monitor those going forward. But the one that I'm going to talk about, which I always think is super awesome, and I talk about this a lot, and I know that Rob's been on here and talked about before, and that is Rob Beresford's Rust Risk Prediction Platform. So if you haven't been into the website that's listed on there, I'd highly recommend doing it. It's a fantastic tool for understanding when conditions are optimal for infection sporulation and latency, when you should go out and survey for Myrtle Rust, potentially when not to go out to survey areas, and it gives you that snapshot across New Zealand, but you can also do it locally for your region as well. Theme 7 is conservation and restoration, which is led by Peter and Albie, and as the name says, looking at that conservation and restoration for future generations. Particular in here, they've looked at genetic markers of taonga, and that's for both kauri and myrtles. They've looked at, or actually Ngāti Kuri did a big program around conservation of their taonga myrtle species. Have a program looking at supporting Maori staff who work in conservation activities in DOC. And then a big part, which is what I'm going to talk about, has been the seed collection and storage, which I think has been some absolutely fantastic work. So Karen has done her PhD through the program, and I've just put a couple of her papers up there. The work that she's done has been absolutely fantastic. She's worked on some of our highly vulnerable species, and we know a lot more about these species and what we can or can't do in regards to their conservation because of her work. The project also has touched on looking at the ecological importance of different Myrtaceae, and as I said at the very start, they link in with Oranga. They're making sure that the protocols that they're putting through are appropriate for Maori use, or it's understood where it's not appropriate. I've put in, for any of you who are into seed banking, I just stuck the seeds from one of Karen's manuscripts in here, and I do know that was some of the work that she has done, and if you're wondering what a Neomyrtus seed looks like, that's what they look like. So heading on to my final slides, and that is the maintaining contact. And so I want to make sure that everybody is aware that the Ngā Rākau Taketake web pages will exist beyond program end. I think that they go for at least another 2 to 3 years beyond. We also have the Myrtle Rust Science stock take, and that is up to date, and it's not just from Ngā Rākau Taketake. That stocktake includes any research that has been published from New Zealand on Myrtle Rust. So it includes everything from the previous programs beyond Myrtle Rust, and also from Ngā Rākau Taketake. So if any of you want to have a look at it and make sure your work is in there, I'd recommend you do, and just contact us if you see something that's missing that you think should be present in there. And the Myrtle Oral Hui is the other one I wanted to just comment on. They'll be continued to be hosted by Mark Harvey, Emma Simpkins from Auckland Council, and myself going forward. If you're not already part of them, highly recommend signing up. Just let me know if you want to continue. I know if you're already on the emailing list, you'll have had something from Anna that has come through, but if you're not on our email list and you want to join those hui, just contact me and let me know, and I can include you onto the email list going forward. So that's pretty much my presentation, but I just wanted to sort of end on this. We're hitting a point. Ngā Rākau Taketake is finishing, Beyond Myrtle Rust is finishing, and we don't actually have anything in the pipeline for Myrtle Rust. However, things aren't getting better, and it might vary a little bit year by year, but it's something that we need to be really concerned about. And so if there was ever a time for the community to work together, it's going to be in these next few months, because it potentially will be quite hard. Also, just wanted to sort of reflect on something. I went to the Forest Biosecurity Conference that the FOA put on just the other week, and I saw dead trees of Pinus radiata from red needlecast. And I can remember back to the very start of when red needlecast came into New Zealand, there was discussion that it didn't kill the trees. And I remember thinking, but how long can these trees withstand that level of defoliation? And I find myself in this Myrtle Rust space thinking the same. How long can our trees withstand this attack for those of them that are getting infected? We do know that some of them can't withstand it for very long, but with our Pahutakawa, what is it going to look like? None of us have a crystal ball, but we can take some of our learnings of other diseases and apply it to this and get some indication. So it's perhaps a little bit of a depressing end to finish on after a fantastic 3 years of work from the Ngā Rākau Taketake researchers, who I'm sure there includes many of you in the audience today. But I suppose from my perspective was that we can't give up, and we've got to keep on, and we might have a bit of a pause, but we need to come back because we've got something really important that we've got to focus on here. And with that, I'll finish up, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Becky. That was awesome, and just an incredible amount of work that has gone on, just an incredible journey. I guess I'll get started with a question, but audience, if you have any questions, just put them into the chat, and there are already a few coming in. So I guess like what my question to you is that what is the biggest challenge facing our myrtles?
The biggest challenge facing our myrtles, other than Myrtle Rust? Or
other than Myrtle Rust, yes.
There's just a lot of pressures on them, and I suppose it depends. If you've got something in a native forest, it's quite different. But at the community hui yesterday, I felt it was really interesting. We had Graham Atkinson, who's from Ngāti Paroa, and he's talking about Myrtle Rust in his native forests. And then you had Hayden Henry and Carlton Bidwa from Tauranga Moana, and they're talking about their trees of significance that are in an urban area. And so we have just so much variation in it. And I suppose the urbanisation part around those trees of significance and those myrtle populations is potentially can be a bit tougher than some of those, some of what they're dealing with in native forests, because they have so many other things that they're dealing with, like Hayden's talking about the reflections and the warmth that come off the housing, or that they're putting up a new development and it makes it a wind tunnel. So you've got this lone tree sitting in the middle of nothing, but it's of absolutely massive cultural significance. Yeah, so it's probably different for different ones. Some of them, it's can be something completely different. And we've got possums that sit on top of everything with all of our myrtles too, and all the other climatic changes that are coming through. They've got a lot to deal with.
That sounds good. So, and a question from the audience, although funding is ending, are there any research projects that are continuing or able to continue through other avenues of work?
I think there's pockets of them. So I know that, for instance, MPI have been doing some work in some of the control. I'm not sure exactly what the project is. Don't have good oversight of it, but they've picked up aspects of funding where they can and have continued it through. And I'd say there will be pockets elsewhere, but in large, not hearing a lot. Don't have any oversight of what's happening with Te Ara Pairangi. And yeah, and unfortunately, the MB bid for Myrtle Rust wasn't put through. But even if it had been put through, if it was funded, we'd still be looking at October. So there'll be little pockets of research here or there, but I'm not aware of anything in particular. And actually, that's something at the next community hui, I think it was Stuart raised yesterday and said next time could we have a bit more of a discussion on that. And so that's the plan for the next one, is to have a bigger discussion around some of the next steps forward where we potentially could find funding.
Sounds good. It's more of a comment, but I think I might change this into a question about ceratocystis, and like the challenge that the myrtles might face with having ceratocystis in the mix as well.
Yeah. I'm going to put it out there. I think if we ever had a disease that we could eradicate, if ceratocystis came to New Zealand, I think that's the one. And my reasonings behind that is it's a rapid disease. So it's 3 days to 3 weeks that it can kill the trees. So if you get it into an area, you know that if that tree gets infected, you've got 3 days to 3 weeks. So the actual, and it's a rapid death of the tree. It's not like myrtle rust, which is the slow progression. It's rapid. So you have the ability to delimit and put an area out, and you'd actually remove those trees because you know that they're not going to survive otherwise. And there's been work that has been done looking at what trees of ours are susceptible. So we do have knowledge of that. It also has can be vectored by insects, so we have the ability to manage insects. And when you look at what's been done over in Hawaii, the pigs are a huge issue. So they fence off an area of forest and they might get 2 or 3 trees within a whole big forested area that have disease, and in the area that's not fenced off from the pigs is probably 50% or more of the trees that have died. So there are actions that we can take around management that you could apply to eradication. So from my perspective, that would be where we can't handle another disease coming in for these myrtles. So from my perspective, if there was ever one that we were going to throw full force into, it would be the 2 ceratocystis species.
Yep, absolutely. I think, yes, we need to make sure it doesn't come in, and if it comes in, get rid of it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So what are the critical pieces of work that needs to be undertaken now in order to be able to protect Myrtaceae?
Personally, myself, it's seed banking. That would be my number one. If we don't retain the seed, we don't have anything to work on in future generations, whatever it be. So if it goes into a breeding program, if we're looking at RNAi as the next tool, whatever else might come along, if we don't have seed, we don't have anything to restore. And I think that's the critical part. So thumbs up to all of the groups and individuals who've been proactive in that space of seed banking. I think that's really, really critical. That would be my number one. And then the other one is just to continue on breeding for resistance. We really need to give that a go. We haven't. We also need to continue to invest in some of the tools, working both in New Zealand but also working overseas, and looking to see what we can bring that can be applied in New Zealand and that would be effective. Yeah, that would be my main ones.
That's good. And then sort of the flip side of that is, which do you think is the most promising solution, a set of activities that can help us look after our myrtles?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely no silver bullet, so that's out there. And I think it's that, we always talk about the toolbox, and I'd say that this is a disease, but rusts are bad to manage. They're really tough. And so it's about what work do you have, what options are there, and you apply multiple options, and then we can get what's needed. But it's not going to be a single cure. It's not going to be one thing. It'll be lots, and it'll also depend on the situation. So chemical control can be really effective potentially on a tree of significance, but it's not applicable for landscape management of myrtle rust. It's picking those tools that best fit the environment that you're working with, or the nature of things. And because the myrtles that we have in New Zealand are so variable, ranging from untouched forests through to urban areas, and then we also have hybrids and all sorts of things that are planted around. So there's lots and lots of different scenarios, and it needs to be a fit for purpose based on what it is. And then we have things that are completely exotic, and they need to be dealt with separately but appropriately.
No, absolutely. And I just, there's a whole heap of different issues that, it was quite sobering when we think about it. But yes, there's also hope. So I think that's it for today. And thanks, Beccy, for your awesome presentation. And just it's been quite a journey, and just an amazing heap of research that has come out of Ngā Rākau Taketake. So a video of today's webinar is going to be made available on the Beyond Myrtle Rust website in the next couple of days, and it's also going to be emailed to everyone who is registered. Our next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, April 17th at 11, as usual. We'll hear from Tez Bofler, who is the assistant professor at the University of Sao Paulo, and her passions include soybean anthracnose and, of course, myrtle rust. So look for the invite in your inbox next month. And thanks, everyone. Haere rā. See you next time.